So I think when your heart leads you, that really paired with I'm going to use the word grit. I'm going to use the word grind. I'm going to use the
Hmm.
word discipline.
Yeah.
People cannot be afraid of putting in the time. They can't be afraid of putting in the hours. And again, that's not to say that you have to be at the office 80 hours a week and that's how you get a promotion. That's not true. Managers are often looking for people who can be efficient, they can be productive, they're good managers of their time, and they also love what they do.
Welcome to the Break Free Podcast. I am your host, David Mansella. As my audience knows, we're dedicating this podcast to interviewing people that are living life in their own terms, that have achieved tremendous success in their life, but also have a life of fulfillment. Why? Well, so we can teach other people like us uh, how to get there faster, how to get there without wasting so much time. And today we have with us Catie, an amazing CEO that has been growing exponentially. And when I did her previous interview, I realized that she's going to have so much wisdom for us that we're going to be overwhelmed, if you will. So, Catie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, David.
Catie, for the audience, can you tell me your full name? Where do you live? And what do you do for a living?
Sure, sure. My name is Catie Bryan. I am the Chief Executive Officer and Hospice Administrator for Bella Care Hospice, which is a hospice in Ohio. We operate only in Ohio. We have 5 locations. We serve between 550 and 600 patients on any given day, so we're certainly a large hospice. I myself live in obviously the Great Buckeye State. I live in the capital in Columbus, Ohio. I live in a suburb called Dublin that is well known for a lot of really fun things. Something we have coming up this weekend is actually the world's largest Irish festival is held in Dublin, Ohio. So that's a lot of buzz around where I live in my little hometown right now, that the largest Irish festival on the planet is starting tonight. So.
So, Catie, tell me about the business that your mission, because people tend to forget, right, that eventually we're gonna end this life, and we are going towards that end, and we don't even want to think about it. But there's people like you that are making a big impact, especially when people are ready to transition to eternity, right? Tell me more about your business.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here, just to even just have a little bit of some time to educate people on, what hospice is and some of the, stereotypes that go along with hospice care. I've been doing hospice for 21 years. I have worked for 3 different hospices, and the mission of all hospices is essentially the same. The mission and the philosophy of hospice is that they are caring for people who have a life-limiting illness. A lot of the misconceptions about hospice services remain the same over the 2 decades that I've been doing this. And just this morning, I had a meeting with an old friend of mine. I'm a runner, and my running coach from about 10 years ago, her husband is ill, and I have not heard from her in several years. And she sent me a text message and said that they were nearing the end of her husband's life, unfortunately, and that they were considering hospice and that they wanted some information. So, just this morning, I got on a call with my friend and her husband. And when I was talking a little bit about what hospice is, he said to me right in the middle of that conversation, "Wow, Catie, you've completely changed what I thought hospice was." He said, "We started this call and I thought that meant that I was on death's doorstep. That I was very close to the end of life." And I said to him, yes, that is, again, one of the biggest misconceptions. Most people think that hospice is just for the final days or hours of somebody's life, and it's not. Hospice can be provided for months. Sometimes people are on hospice for a year. There's nobody who can predict death. And we all know that that has got to be one of the most, difficult things to assess as far as end of life professionals. But, what hospice is it's treating people who know that they are not going to elect, or maybe there is no more curative treatment for them. So they are electing comfort care, or a fancy word for comfort is palliative. So they're electing to just be comfortable and have a greater quality of life with whatever time they have left. So that's the mission and the philosophy of hospice, really, in general.
Now, you touched on a great point. Nobody knows when we're really going to die, right? Even if they give you, a prediction at the hospital, even if you are on stage 4 cancer, I have seen people recover from that. So it's only God that allows us to stay one more day here. Also for you and me, we look healthy and everything else, but I could actually have a heart attack 10 minutes after this meeting, and I'll be gone. And it has happened. Just think about the earthquake that we had at the beginning of the year. 60,000 people died in 2 minutes. Healthy people, right?
Mhm.
So they happened to be in the place where the earthquake was happening in Syria and in Turkey. So great point. So tell me, when a hospice organization like yours, how does it operate? Do you provide home care, or they come to an institution? How does that look like?
That's a great question, and I'm glad that you brought that up. That is actually the second misconception that I talked about just this morning with my friend, is that most people think that hospice is a place. Hospice can be a place. There are many hospices that have sort of a bricks and mortar, or a hospice house, where people are able to go at the end of their life. But that's actually the minority of hospices have kind of that bricks and mortar. Most hospices across the United States are serving patients in their home, wherever they call home. That may be a residential home, that may be an assisted living, a skilled nursing facility. So my hospice services people wherever they are. We see a great deal of people within the walls of facilities, nursing homes and assisted livings, but we also take care of people in their homes. The hospice houses, those are called inpatient units, and those are very much specialized for people when they're in a specific crisis. So, for example, if somebody were to elect hospice or to choose hospice, they don't necessarily go to a hospice house and stay there for the duration of their life. That's not what hospice houses are created for. They're created for crisis and symptom management, short-term stays. While that may be at the very end of your life, it may not be. It may be going there to get your symptoms managed and then going home after that.
Yeah, I would imagine, like, if I know that I have very little time to live, I would want to stay at home with my family, right? Or at least in the comfort of my house if I have nobody that I relate with, right?
Right, absolutely. Eh, most people feel that way. There are some people, and often we see it kind of a difference in cultures. There are certain cultures where the family all comes together. There may be 20 family members staying in a home to care for one ailing family member. Um, there are other people, maybe we have somebody who's young, and they have young children, and they do not want to die in their home. They don't want their children to live in the home where their maybe mother or father had died. So those are the people who would be very appropriate for kind of a hospice house, like I mentioned, when they got to that point. So, most people do want to stay in the comfort of their own home. When they're completing the end of their life. Yes, you're correct.
Very well. Catie, let's look back in time, because I'm curious to see how you ended up in this profession that is much needed and nobody talks about, by the way. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Break Free is to actually show people all different kinds of lives and achieving fulfillment and success in different paths in the marketplace. Because regardless of what we want to think, we need all these services. We all need this spectrum, this variety of products and services that makes a human life better, a little bit easier, because human life is hard. It's always hard. So what happened? Tell me, where were you in your last year in high school? And what was in your mind? What did you decide to do after high school?
Oh, that's a great question. I attended high school in Toledo, Ohio. Northwest. I went to a private all-girls high school. Um, when my parents kind of made the decision to put me kind of on that path with some of the private schools, I did put up a pretty good fight, like I'm sure every seventh grader did. I did not think that my parents were doing the right thing for me at the time, but they really forced the issue and put me into the private school. And then at that time, I went on, of course, to high school, to the all girls school. And looking back on that, it was the right call for me. I mean, I'm a parent now myself, and I can imagine that was a pretty difficult decision for my parents to make. I still remember sitting at the dining room table when they told me I wasn't going to the school that I thought I was going to. So,
Was it a Catholic school?
yes, it was Catholic. Yep. Yep.
That's I believe it was a good choice. I mean, it's hard because it's a lot more discipline. I tell you because I actually went to a Catholic school when I was in grade 4, 5, and 6. I was in a Catholic school, and they teach you discipline for sure.
Oh, they do. They do. They taught me. I mean, yes, I wasn't taught by nuns. A lot of people want to know if all my teachers were nuns. They were not nuns, but there was definitely some nuns that had some positions there. There's one I remember in particular. She carried a ruler around, and she would go up and check how long our skirts were, and if they were too short, she would make them come down. So that was her role at my high school. But my senior year, I was involved in athletics. I mentioned before that I was a runner. I ran track. I did sprints and hurdles and the relays. I was preparing for college. I was definitely spending a lot of time, with friends and socializing and really trying to see kind of what I thought the next steps were going to be. High school internships. At that time, I thought I was going to be a teacher. I did 2 internships with elementary school teachers, and I had actually, when I applied for college, I had applied to the the educational programs at these universities. And, I was accepted into a handful of them. But as soon as I was done with those internships, my senior year of high school, I knew that teaching was not for me. At that time, I had a job at an assisted living, and I worked in the dining room, and served, the folks, the residents of the assisted living. I served them their meals at night, and scooped their ice cream. And it was interesting to me looking back now, because I see how I can see that I was conflicted, because I really thought I wanted to be a teacher and work with kids, and that's the path that I put myself on. But then I also had this job that I loved in an assisted living too, and I was working with geriatrics at the same time. So, I did not know immediately that I was going to go into anything, in the geriatric field, but it's interesting how it turned out. So.
That is amazing. So did you change your career towards that, towards
I
assistant
did.
living?
I did change. I knew that I knew that education was not for me. God bless our teachers out there, but I knew that was probably not the career path for myself. So I pulled from the education program, and I actually went into the journalism. So I have a degree in journalism. We studied, 3 areas with journalism: broadcast, print, and public relations. And I went on the broadcast sequence for my last 2 years at my university. So broadcast journalism was what I thought I was going to do. I worked for a couple TV stations, worked behind the camera, worked in front of the camera, and, really kind of thought that was going to be it for me too. And it just wasn't. I took another path there too. So.
What did you do after graduating university?
I applied for a lot of positions in broadcast. It makes me feel like a dinosaur now. I don't really think I'm that old, but looking back, thinking about the big, huge camera that I had to carry around, and the tripod, and how I had to set it up and get, in front of it. And I had to, go into the room at the media stations and edit it myself. And oh my gosh, this was like, I don't even know if the internet was invented, but things appear so much easier now, but I'd probably have a really hard time with them. But I did apply for some reporting jobs, and I remember I really received like 1 or 2 offers, and they were not in Ohio. They were not, one I think was in Virginia, and another one was somewhere, in the Midwest. And as a college grad, I looking into what maybe the next chapter of my life would be. I didn't feel like that move was going to be, that wasn't really where I saw myself anymore. And so I started just looking for other positions. I kind of started, just looking through everything. I think it was maybe Monster Career Builder back in the day, looking at those online. And I found some healthcare positions, and I saw a position in home care. So it was a management training position. It was entry level for me, and it was based out of Toledo, but had an office in Columbus. And after a few months with that company, this position was kind of all encompassing. I think that's really where, my being in operations now, I think really that's where it all started, because this position trained me on human resources. It trained me on, operations, personnel management, scheduling, all of that happens when you're managing a business where people go into their homes. So after a couple months, they transferred me to Columbus, and really the rest is history. So that was home care, and then I went into hospice shortly after I moved to Columbus.
That's incredible. So it's amazing how it almost, if you look behind the scenes, like the Lord guided you to have this high school job in assisted living, and then you tried to do your own thing, and then you went back into the same industry. Isn't that incredible? Uh, but now you got into management, right? So what was your first, what was your first management role in hospice?
My first management role, I kind of had a middle management position at the second hospice that I was at. The way I got into hospice was actually, going back a little bit, I was still employed at that home care, and I met a hospice chaplain. I met a hospice chaplain at a networking event, and I certainly have a faith background. I have faith. I have a religious background, but spirituality is something that's a little bit more close to my heart. And honestly, I had no idea what hospice was. I had to research it. I had not had any personal experiences with it. I was young. I was in my 20s. And, when I got there, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with being able to do something in healthcare that filled my soul. It felt that this was the right thing to do. And I could certainly talk a little bit more about that later if you'd like, but that's what kind of started charging up my batteries to lead me on to different, to different roles in hospice. So after about 10 or 12 years, I kind of did a mentorship. I didn't directly oversee some marketing and sales professionals. And then the current organization that I'm at right now, my first operations management job, I was the executive director of this hospice where I am right now for 5 years. So I did some, sales oversight and mentorship, kind of overseeing, the business development team, and then moved into the executive director role and did that, like I said, for several years before I moved on to, the role that I'm in now. So I have been promoted here at this organization. I've been here for 11 years now. So.
And you're the CEO of the company, right?
I am the CEO of the company, yes. Yes, I have been the CEO for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Those hospices run as a non-for-profit, or is a for-profit organization?
That's a great question. Both. The answer to that is both. The hospice where I am right now is a for-profit hospice. So I have, I'm very familiar with both nonprofit and for-profit. All hospices are mandated the same. All hospices have the same rules from Medicare. For-profit and non-for-profit hospices, they operate probably pretty, the rules are the same, the requirements are the same, but it's all based on the services that you provide. The mission is to take care of people who are dying, and all hospices really are wonderful, and nonprofits certainly have their place, and for-profits do as well.
Catie, I asked this question because I have a big problem with non-for-profit organizations. I mean, I admire them. I used to be a board member of a non-for-profit for 10 years. But I've seen the struggles of how do they raise the money, how do they have to apply for the grants for the government. Every year is a struggle to secure the funding for the next year. And I'm thinking, I'm an entrepreneur. I own 7 businesses. One of my main companies, one company alone got, set me free for life. And that's why I have the time to talk to you about fulfilling your soul, because the financial situation is already taken care of. And when I see an organization that is helping people that is for profit, for me, it's wonderful, because you're applying the same rules as commercial rules. So you're not depending on any organization to run the mission that you have to run in life. And that's how this free world is being built. Right?
David, there's a reason why I'm on your podcast, because I did not know that was your philosophy. That is 100% my philosophy. I have never worked for a non-for-profit hospice. I've only worked for 3 hospices in 21 years. So I am not a job hopper, but I have spoken with and interviewed and had offers with non-for-profit hospice organizations and other organizations too, and I have not ever felt it's not felt right in my belly to me, the philosophy that some of those organizations have. I think that they're wonderful, but I've always really appreciated what the for-profit organizations have done, and I believe that they give back to their employees. I believe they give back to the community. So I'm very proud of working for a for-profit organization. I that tends to be something kind of a point of contention sometimes, especially when people are choosing a hospice. But tax status should have no bearing on what somebody's choosing for their end of life needs.
For sure. And I believe that we need both organizations. I mean, there is a beautiful place for non-for-profits. I'm just saying it's a lot harder to run than a for-profit business.
Yes.
And especially when you're talking about taking care of people, right? Like directly taking care of people. Because I write software for a business, okay? Mm-hmm. And I do take care of people by automating their businesses, making them more money. If you will, we actually make software for hospitals, which is one of the most beautiful things that we do. We make software also for laboratories. But it's a secondary level of involvement to make this world a better place. You are doing a direct job to making people's life better when they need it the most. Mm-hmm. And I tell you all this because, I live in Canada and we have a socialized healthcare system, for example, and it's against the law to charge for healthcare. And the problem is that when you have a large government controlling a social service, the waits are 8 months, 9 months to see a specialist. My wife was diagnosed with cancer in her throat, and we had to fly away to another country to get her treatment because it was going to take too long here. On the other hand, I've seen people in the system that they go through the system a lot faster. But I wish I had some kind of control over whether I could actually get private health. So I was born and raised in Guatemala, a third world country. And when I go there is 3 different systems that people can choose from. There is a public healthcare system. Now you have another healthcare system based on people that have jobs, employment that is a little bit better than the public. And then you can go to a private hospital if you want. But people have all kinds of access to healthcare, right? So the same thing applies for you and your industry. I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to have the freedom to choose how you want to, run and operate your mission in life, basically, right?
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's really an excellent point. The difference in, the way the healthcare systems are, throughout the world even. So I completely agree with that. I think that sometimes it's underappreciated, here in the United States. Hearing you say that, I think that that's probably pretty accurate. The key is working for an organization that puts their money back into their patients and into their employees. Not, there's there's hospices that are publicly traded on the stock market. I mean, that is not mine, but that's out there. And, I think the key is working for the right kind of organization, profit or non-for-profit, and making sure that, the employees, the patients, and the families are well taken care of. And I think when you have the freedom to be able to use your reimbursement from, Medicare here in the United States is obviously our primary, payer source. Having the freedom to use that money to be able to build different services, to be able to create, different kind of avenues, of things that your patients can receive. I mean, all hospices have to give you a nurse. All hospices have to give you a social worker and a chaplain and a nursing assistant, but not all hospices have to have, a stock of, music, of little boom boxes with a variety, with thousands of different types of music that our staff can take and put at the bedside of a dying patient. They can go and choose from 20,000 songs that we have and make a personalized CD for a patient who loved classical music, or somebody who loved Jimi Hendrix maybe, and have those things that you're able to add on, to make your organization great, in order to make the patient experience great. That's the most important. So it's nice that we do have that kind of freedom to be able to create things such as, the something that I see maybe is very small, but the dying patient and family see that, for me, my hospice, our color is a purple, that we bring in, a purple boombox at the end of life, and we play it while the patient is resting peacefully, and it really has a nice calming effect really on everybody in the room. So that's the difference, is when hospices use their dollars right. They need to use them in order to, again, make the patient experience wonderful, and really to take care of their people. Hospice workers are a different breed. They are special people, and they need to have their own safe spaces too, because what they deal with on a day-to-day basis is incredibly heavy. So, a good organization will pour into their employees just as much as they do their patients.
Now just think about this, Catie, and this is the blessing that you get from being able to actually run this organization as a for-profit company. You talked about music at the end of life, and it's so important. I'll tell you a story that I just read in the Bible. The first king of Israel was a person called Saul, and this guy ended up, misbehaving a lot, and he had this huge affliction in his soul. It's funny because his name is Saul, and he got a huge affliction with his heart and his spirit. And he called David. David was a king yet. He called David because he knew how to play musical instruments and play beautiful songs. So the only way this king will actually fall asleep and be calm at night is by calling David and making him play songs and beautiful music, beautiful spiritual music, so that this guy could actually go to bed. Now, he wasn't dying yet, but he was very afflicted in his heart. Now, this is what you're doing with people that are about to die, or people that are in a heavy healthcare transition, right? And if you didn't have those resources to be able to pour into them, I imagine yourself writing all the paperwork and writing a case and justifying your case before your donors, so you can supply music for these people. And they will come back to you to say, it's too much money. We don't have enough. Deal with the money that I gave you. I know that's the answer you were going to get, because like I said, I've been a board member for many years for non-for-profits, right? So this is what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's a balancing act with it. I mean, the hospices are paid a daily rate. They are paid a daily rate. And that does not matter if that patient is getting 24 hours worth of nurses at the bedside, the most expensive medication. They're getting the most expensive air mattress, they're on a lot of oxygen, or if they maybe don't even have a single need that day, they just call us if they need something. No matter what, hospices are paid the same amount, no matter on what the acuity of the patient is. So, a financially responsible hospice will be able to take that money and again, put it into both buckets, the patient care and also, the employee care as well, because we can't care for our patients if we don't have, employees and staff members who really especially have a hospice heart. They have to have a hospice heart.
Sure. Catie, what would you suggest a person in their early 30s that wants to break through and become eventually, at the top of the organization they're working for or their career? What would you tell somebody like 29, 30 years old that they're trying to go into management and they cannot break through?
I appreciate you asking that question. I've done some teachings here with my team lately just about management and leadership style and, things that are important. I would encourage anybody to first and foremost follow your heart with what feels good inside, because no job or no career, whichever you want to call it, will be fulfilling if it doesn't feed your soul or if it doesn't feed you inside. You have to love what you do. Of course, we all need vacations. We all need a day off. We all need time with our family. We all need time with our friends. That doesn't mean that you don't ever have a day off, or that some days you're not like, oh man, I'm not sure if I want to do that. A lot of people would say, what's your dream job? Some people might say my dream job is to play with animals at the zoo because I love animals. Sure, that certainly could be your job or could be your career. But, if you have found something that you really love, that you feel is fulfilling to you, that you feel like you are helping people at the same time, and that doesn't even just have to be healthcare. There are IT people who, they have a sense of accomplishment and a sense of fulfillment by being able to fix somebody's computer. I know I love my IT people when they come in and do something for me, so they have that. I think when you are fueled by something that you can rest well at the end of the night, knowing that you did a good job and that you're serving, yourself in the community in a good fashion, that will help you. The one thing I tell my staff all the time is that you cannot teach heart. And if your heart is not in it, you should try something else if you're able to, of course. But you can't teach heart. So I think when your heart leads you, that really paired with I'm going to use the word grit. I'm going to use the word grind. I'm going to use the word discipline. Yeah. People cannot be afraid of putting in the time. They can't be afraid of putting in the hours. And again, that's not to say that you have to be at the office 80 hours a week and that's how you get a promotion. That's not true. Managers are often looking for people who can be efficient, they can be productive, they're good managers of their time, and they also love what they do. So, I think that sometimes people are a little bit afraid of hard work anymore. So I think that's very important, following your heart, not being afraid of the grind, not being afraid of putting the time in, when you need to, and then also just being a student all the time. You cannot have an ego too big ever, no matter what room you're in. I always make sure that I am not the smartest person in the room. That's not good for anybody. I don't have the answers. I have a lot to learn. I put myself in situations with different colleagues throughout the industry, even who are much smarter than me. And I sit sometimes in meetings and I don't say a single word because I just want to listen to what they have to say, whether it's something, maybe it's something factual that they're sharing that I need to learn, or maybe it's just their style. Maybe it's the way they talk. Maybe it's, whatever the case might be. Ego aside, you can never, the the people who we will not promote, or the managers who don't make it, 9 times out of 10 have an ego too big to be able to have an opportunity to blossom. So, I would encourage everybody to just make sure that you have that humility. It's important to stay humble as well.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for that. That's deep knowledge for sure. And it doesn't matter what you do in life, if you don't follow through with your heart, like you said, how can you have grit and persistence? And how can you never quit if what you like is just for making money, for example, and it's not
right?
fulfilling you? I actually managed to do it. I went into IT and then into software development, and I fell in love with my career on how it was impacting people's lives. Then I started my own business, and I got so afraid. I got so afraid of not making ends meet that my fear became pride, and my pride almost killed me, because I stopped doing running my business to add value. I started running my business to add more value just to me, if that makes sense. All
Yes.
the way to the point that it was so contradicting with my soul that I actually had a heart attack in 2011. My body had to stop and say, I'm not doing this anymore, because you're just wrecking your life.
Mm-hmm.
So then I had to take a very, very big pause. I took a long vacation, and I started working on figuring out what's the meaning of life. And once I got my purpose back from God, once the Lord sat me down and he told me, this is why you're an IT person, this is how you're adding value. Now you can actually have fulfillment in life if you go back to that and not look so much at the money. I mean, the money is important, don't get me wrong. But I was so afraid to be in scarcity, because I had a big job with a big salary, that scarcity that fear of scarcity turned into greed. And once you have greed in your heart, it's the end of your life. It's horrible to live as a greedy person, regardless how much money you have. But the problem with having greed is that the more money you have and you have greed, the more money you want, and it will never fulfill you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. I mean, when it comes down to it, the bottom line, the reason why I work many hours, the reason why I get on a soapbox often about the philosophy of, what my particular organization is, let's say, for us, why do I do all of this? Bottom line, because I believe that there's a better way to die than most people die. And that is what fuels my heart. That is what makes me want to talk about it. That's what makes me want to work harder. That's what makes me want to care for more people, provide more education for people. But that is all fueled by my heart, by the pride that I have in being able to really create a beautiful experience at the end of life. And that can go for whatever industry you're in,
Catie, so much. I thank you so much for your time, for the value that you're adding to this podcast. I don't want to abuse it either. So I'll finish this podcast with one last question.
Okay.
If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write?
What would I write on a billboard? Don't be scared. I think that's what I would write. Don't be scared. Be brave, be courageous in everything in your life. I was scared to get my first management job. I was scared to work in an office. I was scared to run the championship relay and track in high school. I was scared to become a mom. Maybe I'd say don't be scared, or maybe I'd say be brave, because that's how you grow. That's where you grow. That's where you get your greatest moments of accomplishment. And it's probably where you get your failures too. But those are all part of developing who you are as a human. So I think I'd probably change that to saying be brave.
Yeah, being scared has been the top reason in my life for which I make the most mistakes. Because it's a lie, right? If you think about it, most countries live with $2 a day. Most people in countries live with $2 a day, right? And that being scared, being afraid is of the future, right? It's, oh, what's going to happen
Yes.
if I do that? Or what's going to happen if they don't pay me this? And yeah, and it's so funny because today, I have a time alone before I start working, and I call it a devotional, but it's just a time alone where I meditate on the word. And what you just said is actually is listen to this. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.
I love that. Yeah.
That's what you just said. It's in
Yeah.
Joshua 1:9 if people want to figure it out. And if I would have known this, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 3 years ago, by the way,
Yes.
I wouldn't have, make all the mistakes that have cost me greatly. I almost died. Actually, I faced death in front of me because of not following these instructions. So, Catie, thank you so much for your time. If people would like to ask you more questions, if they would like to find more about your hospice, how can they find you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. We are on the web, of course, bellacarehospice.net. There is an informational tab where you can submit any information. I am on LinkedIn. Catie Bryan is my name. Again, working for Bella Care Hospice here in Ohio. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me. LinkedIn, or I do receive all the inquiries and everything on the website for the company, so that would go directly to me too. So
that's fantastic. Catie, thank you so much for managing this important organization. I know you have many people under you, and you're actually changing people's lives. God bless. Have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you very much.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.